Pursuant to Internal Revenue Service guidance, be advised that any federal tax advice contained in this program is not intended to be used, and it cannot be used by any person or entity for the purpose of avoiding any tax penalties that may be imposed by the Internal Revenue Service or any other U.S. federal taxing authority or agency, or promoting, marketing, or recommending to another party any transaction or matter addressed in this show. The opinions expressed by the host and the guests are their own and may not be used as authoritative advice. Any use of this material without the written consent of the host is strictly prohibited.
You're listening to the IRS Radio Hour with your host, Attorney Stephen Leahy, on AM 560, The Answer. Tune in every week at 5 for an informative discussion about IRS obligations, credit card debt, mortgage default, collection activity, and how to resolve these legal issues using tax resolution, debt settlement, mortgage loan modification, foreclosure defense, and bankruptcy. Your host is Stephen Leahy, a Chicago attorney and the principal at Oakham Tax Resolution and the law office of Stephen A. Leahy, PC. Stephen is the author of Deal With Your IRS Problems Today. IRS and debt issues are serious, but there is help. There are resolutions. So get ready and take notes during the IRS Radio Hour. And now, here's your host, Attorney Stephen Leahy.
Hello, Chicago, and welcome to the IRS Radio Hour. And I am your host, Attorney Stephen Leahy. Lots has happened in the last week. Lots of news, lots of things. Well, I don't want to talk about the last week before we talk about what's going on in the next day or two, Jim.
Hi, this is Jim Leahy. Nice to talk to everybody again. We're back for another week's show on a Sunday night at 5 o'clock. Thanks for tuning in.
Well, thanks for reminding me that it's Sunday night at 5 o'clock.
That's right. I was going to say, well, it is. There's an important weekend that we're at here, and this is Memorial Day weekend. Some people think it's the beginning of summer, but as you and I were just talking about,
well, it is the beginning of summer.
Well, it is, but some people are kind of, there are a bunch of people who really are. Want people to focus more on the real reason why it's here, and
well, I agree with that. And we talk about this around Christmas all the time. About some people get concerned about the pageantry and the celebration and forget to focus on what it's all about.
That's right. This Memorial Day used to be called Decoration Day, and it was called Decoration Day because people would go and decorate the graves of the people who paid the ultimate price or gave the ultimate sacrifice, which would be during wartime. Mm-hmm. We have Veterans Day, which is for the veterans. But there are people who want people to understand that there was a time when this holiday was on May 30th until 1967. I believe 1971 it changed on May 30th, and the date was set because it was during the Civil War when the holiday was presented to people, and they wanted to pick a day that didn't have any significance to any single person or a group. So there was no anniversary of a war
or a battle.
It was
because this was really about the Civil War, and almost in every town, hamlet, village, there were 600,000 casualties.
So almost every town
had a graveyard full of dead war veterans, and people would on this day would go and decorate the graves.
Yes, and so it went that way until 1960. I believe 1971 it changed, but in 67 is when the new law came. And
we did that for federal employees because they wanted federal employees to have a 3-day weekend.
So, a lot of people forget what this is about. And it's, I would like to say one thing, Semper Fidelis, I'm a Marine. And
you almost said former Marine.
I almost said it, but there's no such thing as one, as a former Marine. So I wanted to point out, people really don't mind that it's barbecues and swimming. It's just it's nice to stop and remind your family and remind people about why we're doing what we're doing, and we're calling it that day.
I know you every Memorial Day you go out with your family and put flags on at the cemetery.
Not Memorial Day, on the Saturday before we meet. I'm a member of the American Legion post in Lake Forest, and we go to the graveyards, and my family, I have 5 kids, so we've been doing this for 10 years or so. we go to the graveyard and we spend the morning about 7 o'clock till about 8:30 or 9 putting flags on graves. And it's something that, the kids don't like waking up early on Saturday morning, and there's a little bit of fighting, but until we get to the graveyard, everything works out fine. So we'd like to, there's, maybe if there's some time at the end, you'd like to point out to people that there are a lot of people who are like I said, paid the ultimate price. And
Medal of Honor winners.
And there are Medal of Honor winners. Right. And this is a day for people who gave their lives during the war. So maybe if there's some time at the end, we'll read one or two citations. But there are 3,800 or 3,468.
I got the numbers here in front of me, Jim. So the numbers are, there's a total of 3,468 Medal of Honor, Congressional Medal of Honor winners.
Or recipients.
The recipients is probably the correct term. That's yes. Right. And there's 2,403 from the Army, 747 from the Navy. Let me make sure I get that right. 297 Marines.
Hoorah.
17 from the Air Force, 1 from the Coast Guard, and 621 of those 3,468 were posthumously recipients of the Congressional Medal of Honor.
And that's what this weekend is all about.
Well, let's not forget that.
No, let's not forget it. So we'd like to...
well, let's move around. Again,
last week we were talking about what we would talk about this week, and I know we're kind of, maybe we could find a. Would you like to read a citation now, and then we can go into the next section? Or
well, I don't have one in front of me, but we could do it the next section.
Okay. This week in the news, again with the continuing saga, which I like to say, of our IRS and how this is just falling apart. We found out today that the IRS floated a rules change. It was supposed to take place, and the rules change was to take away some of the to put in place more restrictions.
Well, what I like about this rules change debate has to do with exactly what people were objecting about the IRS targeting Tea Parties and not other political organizations. Mm-hmm. And so, it was wrong, according to, I think everybody agrees that it was wrong to target the Tea Party or any particular political organization.
Or at least they say they thought it was wrong.
That's right. So I don't know how it makes sense now to try to codify exactly what the abuse was.
And this is the IRS on its own, wasn't it? This wasn't congressional actions. This was the actions of a bunch of bureaucrats in the middle of
Washington.
Exactly.
So they say, we got caught doing something wrong, so now let's make the regulations that now wouldn't be wrong for us to do that.
So they can continue doing what we were complaining about them doing, but now they're going to make it legal for them to do what they're doing.
And there's a thread going through a lot of the IRS actions recently, and there's a couple things we're going to talk about today. One is exactly these rule changes. Another we mentioned last week, which was FATCA, and how they're imposing these rules on foreign financial institutions. And another one is tax preparers, and the IRS recently instituted rules on tax preparers and required licensing and continuing education. This is a case called Loving, and 3 tax preparers brought some action against the IRS and prevailed in court and stopped the IRS from doing this. They were doing things. They're making these rules out of whole cloth.
So this is the problem with what's in the news today is that it was actually, thank God, some of the congressional leaders, the head of the House Ways and Means Committee being one of them, came up to them and said that thank God this was stopped. No, in February, 30-plus senators tried to put a bill forward to have the IRS stop making its own regulations and have to come in front of and it went nowhere. Of course, in the Senate, nothing's going anywhere in the Senate. There's a stone wall up there, and some people say that's good, other people say it's bad, but
Well, there's this common thread in that when I work with people and I help people with IRS problems, what we're doing is a lot of times people find that the IRS makes up rules as they go along and they don't know what they are. And so my job often is to keep the IRS feet to the fire and keep them in the regulations and apply the rules that apply.
And that'll go towards the case that you're just talking about that was just litigated.
And we're going to talk about that a lot in the next segment, that's coming up. And again, put this all together and show the common thread.
Well, I'd like to tell them, the 3,400 groups have filed for tax-exempt status in 2012. 3,400. People are looking out there trying to save their. I mean, they think that they have a reason to organize and to hold the government and to go against the government.
They do, and this all goes back to free speech and our free speech here. But we don't have free speech because we're going to go to break right now, and then we're going to come back. So join us again on 560 The Answer.
See you on the other side.
Welcome back to the IRS Radio Hour with attorney Stephen Leahy. Stephen has helped hundreds of Chicagoans recover from financial disaster, and he wants to help you and your family. There are resolutions, and you will hear about all those resolutions during today's informative discussion on the IRS Radio Hour on AM 560 The Answer. Now, here's your host, attorney Stephen Leahy.
And welcome back, and a happy Memorial Day. Do you say happy Memorial Day, Jim?
Well, yeah. I think that we hope that they have a happy and healthy Memorial Day weekend.
We have kind of a tradition at our house, in that we do have a barbecue, and
yes, we do.
Yeah, and Jim and I live close by to one another.
So next door,
we do live next door to each other, and so we have a family barbecue usually on Memorial Day and
4th of July.
4th of July. That's big days around our house. I have a little hot dog stand that I give hot dogs out, and the kids love it, and it's an important day, though. But again, we do celebrate like everybody else, but we don't want to forget about what Memorial Day is all about. And so, in that vein, we want to read a citation from a Medal of Honor winner.
Yes, this is a Medal of Honor winner from the World War II, since this is our greatest generation, and we're losing lots of them every week. So his name would be Louis Kenneth Bossell. His citation is for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty while serving in 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, 1st Marine Division, during action against the enemy Japanese forces in Peleliu Island. The Apollo Group, 15 September 1944. Valiantly placing himself at the head of his squad, Corporal Bossell led the charge forward against a hostile pillbox, which was covering the vital sector of the beach, and, as the first to reach the emplacement, immediately started firing his automatic into the aperture, while the remainder of his men closed in on the enemy. Swift to act as a Japanese grenade was hurled into their midst, Corporal Bossell threw himself on the deadly weapon, taking the full blast of the explosion, sacrificing his own life to save his men. Excuse me. His unwavering loyalty and inspiring courage reflect the highest credit upon Corporal Bossell and the U.S. Naval Service, United States Marine Corps. He gallantly gave his life for his country, lest we forget.
And I got to tell you, I got chills when you were reading that. It's a very touch, this is just one, and you can go through this whole list, and it's an amazing. Each one is an amazing story.
It's at www.history.army.mil, and you can look through all the citations and they broke it down into what war they were in. And broke it to the most recent, and I would like to do the most recent, but like I said, this was. If we have time, we'll do that, because this is the greatest generation.
Again, each one just gives you chills, and you think of the courage of each man and woman. I'm sure have won the Congressional Medal of Honor. It's just an amazing story, and of course, this is what we're all. This is what this show is all about: is preserving the American way and protecting American citizens.
That's right. And as we were talking about before, and it's not necessarily a conspiracy that the government gets. It's just the natural form of government that it gets too big, and it's important that people understand that you just can't look the other way and forget. You have to stand up for your rights. As Ronald Reagan said, we're only a generation away
I agree with that. And
from losing the freedoms that other people have.
I'm going to throw you another curveball, Jim, because there's something that we didn't talk about, I think, in the pre-show, in that the VA scandal.
Yes.
And here we are at Memorial Day, and we want to give our veterans the best of everything, and yet we give them the worst. It's just amazing to me that, and I keep hearing that we're going to improve the system and it's going to, we're going to fire people.
Well, many of us who are veterans really kind of understand it is important that the VA is there, but a lot of us understand that. I used to tell people, if you want universal health care, go to the VA and look. I mean, it's a bureaucracy, and the doctors are great, and the nurses are great, but the system is set up so that you're just a number.
People like Paul Krugman, who have touted the VA as the epitome and the template of the way our whole healthcare system should work. I think I have to kind of eat some crow here, because this is the worst system possible. Now, I was listening. I think there's a...
That's right. Right now, I know there are congressmen demanding that, how we fix this? We allow these people who have had to wait for months to go to a private physician and pay, and we pay the bill. I mean, we owe this to these people, to these veterans. This is something that we promised them, that this would be something that they would have.
Well, here we are on the radio, and I got to say, I listened to Mark Levin.
On another station.
That's right. But Mark Levin is, he's touted this, vouchers. Why don't we give them vouchers? Let them pick the best doctors. They certainly have earned it.
Well, of course they have. And you know what that would be? That would bring competition into the system. And boy, oh boy, that would bring the prices down. And the fact is, it wouldn't be as expensive as having to build official government hospitals and have and I'm not blaming the nurses or the doctors. They're fantastic. I was in the service. I was never, but like I said, after I got out, I used my private health care. And I did that for a reason. I did that because when my grandfather had cancer, I just felt like we would walk into to the hospital around here, which is now being in question of lying about.
But that was in the 70s, Jim.
That was in the 70s. And the World War II generation was still, there were millions of veterans using that system, and they trusted the government. That's something about the greatest generation that was maybe a little bit different than we are. They thought that was the answer. The fact is that we learned that is not the answer.
I agree. And again, if we want to give them a good system, this is not the system that we should have.
No.
I know we got to kind of gone off on a tangent here but it is Memorial Day. It is something that's important. That's in the news.
That's right.
And I got to tell you how many veterans have financial problems because of this. They get out and they have, they're ill and they can't pay their own mortgage. And a lot of them are facing foreclosures and,
a lot of the
credit card
hospitals
debts.
and a lot of the VA hospitals have closed. They have to travel longer and longer ways to go to the hospitals. So the fact is, I believe you're correct. Let's live up to our promise to these people. Let's get behind some of this legislation that would allow them to use vouchers to go to whatever doctor that they feel comfortable with. I just don't think that there's any question that's the answer. And speaking of the answer, we're on
560. The answer
on Sunday afternoons at 5:00. Ding 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 ding. Welcome. So like I said, you're right. We're supposed to be talking about other things, but this is very important to the American people, I believe, and I believe that most people think that these heroes that we had were promised something and should. Well,
you said we had, but we have them. They're here with us. They're among us.
Well, you'd be surprised at how many people really are.
I think maybe before the end of the show, maybe we'll find the most recent or one of the most recent Medal of Honor runners, because we have these battles going on right now, and people doing extraordinary things that should be held up. And I think sometimes because politics gets in the way, that we forget that to the men and women who are fighting, the politics means nothing.
No, this is the problem. There's no politics in this. It's not Democrat or Republican. This is something that we've promised these people that we should follow up on. I mean, when you bring it up, when I saw brought up on the Senate floor, right away it's well, they're trying to blame the president for this. No, we don't care who the president is right now. Fix it. Well, don't leave General Shiznecki there. I mean, somebody has to pay for this. Somebody should be moved on.
But my point, Jim, is you can't fix it. The system doesn't work. I
understand, but then have the head of the VA stand up and say, we need the most important part is not that you guys are happy in the Congress with it. The most important part is our veterans are happy. Our veterans are well taken care of. Our veterans we're living up to the promise that we've given to them and their families, because remember, their families also. So this is not just a partisan issue. This is something that we've promised, and that it's important that we hold their feet to the fire. As we were saying, a lot about this show is reminding people that that one voice can do a lot, and it really can. And, we're going to go into something here where some tax preparers came up on their own. They weren't attorneys, but we said a lot of these companies that offer what you do.
So what I would encourage people to do is when you're at the barbecue this weekend, when you're having a beer, a nice cold beer, maybe we could stop, take a moment, say a prayer, thank the veterans, remember why we have that Monday off.
That's right.
And remember, so let's not forget it. It's important.
Well, the thing here is, and then bring up to your family, we do owe this to the veterans.
Because we're going to come on the other side and we're going to talk about debt relief. Okay, well, exciting. So stay tuned.
You're listening to the IRS Radio Hour with attorney Stephen Leahy on AM 560, The Answer. Attorney Stephen Leahy brings his passion and expertise to your radio each and every week during the IRS Radio Hour. Tune in, take notes, and be educated. Learn your options resolving financial obstacles that face so many. And now, back to the IRS Radio Hour with your host, attorney Stephen Leahy.
I am your host, attorney Stephen Leahy. We've been talking for several weeks now about FATCA. I keep talking about the acronym FATCA, so I want to tell you what FATCA stands for. FATCA is the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act.
And this ties into the things that we've been with the IRS writing their own regulations and rules.
And these rules really apply to foreign banks and financial institutions. And as I mentioned, I think last week, that in the last several years, our federal government has forced these foreign institutions to reveal American citizens who have accounts there.
Well, Steve, how could they do that, since that would be almost as having a treaty, and that has to go through the Senate? How could just some bureaucrat sitting in Washington do this?
Because they thought it was a good idea, Jim. And this is what all of this comes into. They said, well, this would be a good idea for us to do. If we can make this rule, we can get a lot of money, because we can find Americans who are lying to the IRS, and then we can fine them and have penalties. Some of the penalties for FATCA are 50%. It's actually, FATCA is a hybrid of another law, and that's the foreign bank and transactions. And this is where if the IRS finds out that you have a bank account in a foreign nation, they can penalize you up to 50% of the value of that account.
Oh, this is what you were saying last week about the people who are giving up their citizenship for this reason.
Absolutely. And it's also because if you're a continued citizen, then you have to continue to report your income to the United States government for the IRS. And that's what people are trying to stop. So if they're giving up a lot of money that are in these institutions, these foreign institutions, and then that continues. Once they find out it's there, now they're going after American citizens abroad, because the American laws say you need to report any income from whatever source.
Didn't we just see last month that they had set a record on the amount of tax money coming into the system?
That's right. It's not enough.
And it's still not enough. It's insatiable.
Now, you mentioned that FATCA seems to be a treaty, and that's one of the things that might save us here, because there is a effort going forth now to say this is unconstitutional. The IRS doesn't have the right to implement these rules on foreign nations without the consent of the Senate.
I don't see how they could be raising taxes, which is kind of what they do in that other example that we gave before. You're finding new lines of revenue. That would be taxes. That belongs in the House of Representatives. I mean, here's a bunch of bureaucrats up here just deciding that this is up to them to be able to implement without having anybody. There's, the problem, ladies and gentlemen, is there's no accountability if the bureaucrats are the ones doing it. You can't, you don't
elect them.
No, yeah, you don't elect them. They're unelected. They're not held accountable. So any of the congressmen can come home and say, I didn't know about that.
So sometimes we talk about term limits, and I've heard term limits, but the bureaucrats don't have any term limits.
No, which is one of the arguments against term limits is that everything will be run by bureaucrats and people who, and just everything else will just fall to the wayside. And then who's responsible for these things once they come up?
So so I just talked about FATCA.
Wasn't there another?
This is what we talk about, the tax preparers now. Now, at my office, we do tax preparation because a lot of people come to see me and they haven't prepared their taxes in some years. And so one of the big things that we do is we get them in compliance, and getting people in compliance means filing their taxes, so we have to prepare taxes. The IRS took it upon themselves to implement regulations and made them have licenses and made them and said that you had to take continuing education courses in order to be a licensed tax preparer. And right now, you don't have to be a licensed tax preparer. There is no license. But what happened was that this group, 3 tax preparers, took the IRS to court, and the IRS, again, they lost in court. Now,
what was the law? What was the law that the IRS cited that they could do that?
This was a Horse Act from 8 years before the IRS was even implemented that gave them the federal government authority to regulate certain activity, and so they tried to kind of go with that law that had nothing to do with taxes and say, well, this gives us the authority to do that.
It couldn't have had anything to do with taxes since there was no IRS at the time that the law was implemented.
But the argument was, well, hey, it had to do with the federal government, and we're the federal government, so we should have that right to do whatever we want.
So what was the outcome of that? Is it still being litigated?
It was being litigated, and actually the appeals date just elapsed. So the IRS decided not to appeal it. So you know what they're doing is now they're saying, well, now we're going to implement a voluntary system. But it's going to be just as onerous as any other system.
The problem here is what's to stop them from next month when no one's paying any attention to implementing it anyway?
Well, I agree. And this is why people need a qualified, experienced attorney on their side. Because to stop this rogue agents from doing whatever they please.
And that would be Stephen Leahy, wouldn't it?
And so if you're having that problem,
in touch with you
should call me at 312-664-6649. You can visit me on the web at chicagotaxteam.com, or you can listen to our show every Sunday night at 5 o'clock on 560 The Answer.
Welcome back to the IRS Radio Hour with attorney Stephen Leahy. Stephen has helped hundreds of Chicagoans recover from financial disaster, and he wants to help you and your family. There are resolutions, and you will hear about all those resolutions during today's informative discussion on the IRS Radio Hour on AM 560 The Answer. Now, here's your host, attorney Stephen Leahy.
And welcome back. We are here every Sunday evening at 5 o'clock. It is streamed on my blog. I do stream it, so you can, if you can't listen on Sundays, you can go to my blog at chicagotaxteam.com.
That's what my mom does.
Yeah, that might be too technology for her, so she can listen to it. Now I'm going to hear it because I see.
Or my brother in Florida, Ken, does.
He listens to it online. You can also go to 560wind.com, and it's streamed there also. So you can always find my show there.
Well, Steve, it is Memorial Day weekend. I think we should do one more of another citation.
I agree.
This one is Mr. It's Willibald C. Bianchi.
I love that name.
Yes, me too. His citation is for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty in action with the enemy on 3 February 1942 near Bacak, province of Bataan, in the Philippine Islands. When the rifle platoon and another company was ordered to wipe out 2 strong enemy machine gun nests, First Lieutenant Bianchi voluntarily and on his own initiative advanced with the platoon leading part of the men. When wounded in action by 2 bullets to the left hand, he did not stop for first aid, but discarded his rifle and began firing a pistol. He located a machine gun nest and personally silenced it with grenades. When wounded the second time by 2 machine gun bullets through the chest muscle, First Lieutenant Biaggi climbed to the top of the American tank, manned its anti-aircraft machine gun, and fired into a strongly held enemy position until knocked completely off the tank by a third severe wound. Lest we forget.
Never forget. So this, man, it's important stuff.
That really is.
And that's just.
And I like the fact that these guys' names are.
I think you're only in the B's.
I know I'm only in the B's.
It's amazing.
I'd start crying if I got to the C's. So
would I.
But I don't really cry. I'm in the Marine Corps.
I understand.
Well, we were talking before the break. We said we were going to talk about your blog and where is your blog located?
I did mention the blog, and the blog's at chicagotaxteam.com.
Okay, and you put on. I saw a recent article. Mm-hmm. And what is that about?
I published an article just recently about deficiencies and foreclosures in Illinois, because Illinois is a unique state. I shouldn't say unique. I shouldn't say, but we are what they call a recourse state. And recourse means that mortgage companies have the right to go after homeowners after they foreclose on your property. So if they foreclose on your property and they don't generate enough money on the sale to pay the debt that you owe, there's a balance due, and the IRS, the mortgage companies can come after you.
No, I thought you told me that some of that stuff was the IRS was.
And this is how it matches with the IRS. When a debt is forgiven, the mortgage company will send you a 1099. What they call 1099-C. This is a debt cancellation.
As if you worked for them?
It's right. It's income. And so if you have a great deficiency, if the number is very large.
How about a good deficiency?
If you have.
I'm sorry.
If the number is very large, then you're going to be facing a large tax burden, because now all of a sudden I have to pay taxes on that deficiency amount, that amount that was forgiven by your mortgage company. Now, in 2007, Congress passed a law that allowed to forgive that debt and not count it as an income for any home-related cancellation of debt. And that they have renewed it several times since then. But this year, they didn't renew it. It hasn't been renewed yet. It may still be renewed for the next year. But as we sit here today, that's not happening.
Does that take congressional movement?
Absolutely, it does. And one of the consequences of that is that the short sales, and people have probably heard a lot about short sales recently in the last several years.
Tell me about short sales.
A short sale is when the mortgage company agrees to take less than you owe them in order for you to sell the property. So if I owe the mortgage company $200,000 and my home is only worth $150,000,
that's underwater the way that.
That's right. Okay, then the mortgage company will say, okay, we will accept the $150,000 and we will waive the deficiency for the remainder, usually. And that's the important part. You got to make sure that they do waive the deficiency, because otherwise they can come after you for that balance and sue you. But usually in short sales, they will waive the deficiency. And that's when you get this 1099-C, which will create a tax burden on you at the end of the year. So while you've just given up your home because you couldn't sell it for as much as it was worth, and now you're going to be strapped with this IRS debt.
Which is why it's important to have an attorney with you watching out for your rights, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that goes from the beginning, from the foreclosure through the IRS obligation. So, the best thing to do is to avoid the IRS obligation. But sometimes you can't do that. And there are other ways to go about and avoid paying taxes on any deficiency that's out there.
But it's important that they find somebody who could help them. How do they find?
And again, that's what bringing it all together, and that's what we do at our office. We bring it all together. So if you're having a foreclosure action, you want to get in early. Talk to an attorney. Talk to me. Call me. My telephone number is 312-644-7200. 888-664-6649. You can visit me on the web at chicagotaxteam.com. You can send me a question at questions@irsradiohour.com. So there's lots of ways to get in touch with me. Don't wait. Get on the phone. Give me a call.
See you on the other side.
You're listening to the IRS Radio Hour with attorney Stephen Leahy on AM 560, The Answer. Attorney Stephen Leahy brings his passion and expertise to your radio each and every week during the IRS Radio Hour. Tune in, take notes, and be educated. Learn your options resolving financial obstacles that face so many. And now, back to the IRS Radio Hour with your host, attorney Stephen Leahy.
I am your host, attorney Stephen Leahy, and we do mention on this bumper coming in that you should, if you have financial problems, that you should listen to what we're talking about. But if we're not talking about the specific issue that you're facing, because we can't talk about everything all the time, even though we try, you should call my office. You should contact me. And my phone number is 312-664-6649.
Is that right here in Chicago, Steve?
I am right here in Chicago. My office is in downtown Chicago. I'm at the corner of Randolph and Michigan Avenue.
And there's parking there?
There's lots of parking there, Jim.
That's good.
I'm right close to the Daily Center. So there's a courthouse there. I go to the courthouse occasionally because I help people with foreclosures, and that's a state law. And the federal courthouse is very close to, and that's bankruptcy, and bankruptcy is a federal law.
So Steve, I'd like to get to something that's very near and dear to both of our hearts. We're long-time suffering North Side baseball fans.
I love baseball, Jim.
I love baseball too.
I've been a season ticket holder for the Cubs for more than 20 years.
Yes, you have. And many years I was there with you, and I will tell you one thing, it breaks my heart. But let's go into I remember my oldest boy looked at me and said, "How could you do this to somebody you love?" I
always tell people, I love baseball, and so my team is the Cubs. But if you like baseball, you got to pick a team, and you got to stick with them.
Well, I believe that, if you live in Nebraska, you pick a team. If you're born in an area, you're given a team.
Well, we have two teams here, and so there's a lot of Sox fans.
Somewhere north side or somewhere south side. If I was born on the south side, I'd be a White Sox fan.
Probably that's true.
My grandfather was.
My grandfather was a Sox fan, and he tried to make me a Sox fan. It didn't work.
He did. Well, we're both. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. We do want to say we feel bad for one great pitcher, the best pitcher in the major leagues, even after this week, Jeff Samardzija. Oh, do you want to go into football now, Jeff?
I think that what's going to happen is the Cubs are going to dump him anyway.
We're going to have to trade him.
It hurts.
It hurts badly.
You know what else I want to talk about, Jim, is the Blackhawks, because the Blackhawks are huge. And I think I watched the Wednesday game with you. Now, last week I got a listener called and told me, Steve, you should have been bold, and you should have said, the Blackhawks won that game, because
they did win Sunday.
I understand.
And I did say go Hawks.
You did say go Hawks, but we didn't know if they were going to win or lose. Now we do tape this show. I shouldn't say tape, but record the show. We don't tape anymore, Jim. It's not tape anymore.
Oh, okay.
It's digital. So we do record the show. We do record the show before Sunday. So the Hawks haven't played, but I'm going to say the Hawks won. It was awesome.
And that would be Saturday's game.
That is.
That would be Saturday.
It was a great game. Now, Jim and I watched the Wednesday game, and what a great first period.
Second period was great, too.
Great second period.
Third period was left a little bit be desired. I had a couple of questions on some of those penalties, but I don't want. Let's not go after the referees.
I understand. So, but next week we're going to talk more about, because we don't have Memorial Day, so we're going to talk more about debt issues and foreclosures and IRS debt issues and all of that. So.
Like I said, we look forward to next week, and we want to know how can people read your blog, Steve? Where is your blog?
My blog is at chicagotaxteam.com, and there's lots of good stuff there. I try to put at least one new article a week. We have new videos every week about different information about IRS issues. Whether it's installment agreements.
Are we here every Sunday, Steve?
Every Sunday, Jim.
And what time are we on?
5:00 on 560 The Answer, and we're going to be here next week, and we're going to be here the week after. But if you have a question, you should contact me at questions@irs. irsradiohour.com
or
312-664-6649. That's it.
And he's here in Chicago.
And have a great week, and see you next time.
Happy Memorial Day.